Hi, everyone. Welcome to the GoldFish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. Today is Friday, August 10th, 2018, and this is our weekly Country Roads with Winston Shrout. And of course, we have Winston joining us. How are you today, Winston?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Got a good night's sleep, and so maybe I can get through some of this information today with my eyes wide open.
That's great. And, me too here. I think, as I was telling you before we started, I've had enough of 3D. I think it's time we end the duality on this planet, and it's time to get the hell out of here and move ahead. Move ahead. And, in moving ahead, I just wanted to say, in that spirit, I'm going to screen share something that, I'm going to screen share. Yeah. You know, that we started the United States Space Force, right?
Yeah,
And so
well, yeah, they say that, but go ahead.
well, just for people's information, this is the Twitter page for the Space Force, and I did retweet this. And it is about Roswell. And you remember, Winston, that interview we did with Cobra and your friend James Gilliland also. And I said, why can't we just say, okay, Roswell happened. This is what happened. They crashed. We got the technology. We got transistors. We got fiber optics. And of course, we also got the Yellow Book, which contained all the sentient life in the universe, in this particular universe, and how to combine and re-engineer genetically these things. So, and of course, Cobra's response was, well, if they did that, the whole, then it would just expose everything. But here we have the United States Space Force, even though it's not official yet, but this is their Twitter page. And it's got the picture of the aliens. It's got the picture of the autopsies here. It's got the picture of the crashed ship, and of course the story in the newspaper, which of course disappeared. So this is progress, don't you think, Winston?
Well, it could be, but like I say, some of this stuff is so old hat to me that, it, for instance,
Yeah.
what's called the Roswell crash. It was just fragments of stuff scattered all over the heck and back. But the real value was the one at what Coronado, or anyway, one that came down
Right.
in the Colorado. Because I have in the past spoken to an individual who was the first on the scene, and he told me stuff.
Wow.
And so, and then again, we talk about that picture of that autopsy and stuff. I talked to one of the guys who was actually, one of those who was doing that autopsy. Then I spoke to another, a fellow who was actually at the alien interview. So all this kind of stuff to me is so old hat, I don't really get too excited when they start talking about all it. But a lot of people who have not been exposed to it,
Right.
uh, just because I say it or you say it or Randy says it or Gilliland says it or whoever, people don't give a whole lot of credibility to us.
Right.
But when the government comes along and says, yeah, these things really happen, then people start to perk up a little bit. So it's good. I mean, I'm not against it at all. As a matter of fact, you're very much in favor of it.
Right.
But the information that comes out to some of us is just, you know,
Right. It's old hat. No, I
it's old
understand.
hat stuff.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to screen share that here we have Mattis says there's a competent agreement between the DoD, White House on Space Force, to infinity and beyond. And so here we have also the latest tweet where the president said the same thing: Space Force all the way. And of course, we're ready, sir. And this is their response. So you can tell that this is the Space Force unofficial site, but it is getting up and going. I guess it's easy to get. The ease of social media today makes it easy to at least establish a presence in the virtual, in the World Wide Web. So that's interesting. So all this has to do with the talk that uh, Vice President Pence, and again, this was directed to Pence and to, well, let's see, Mattis and of course Dunford. I think that's who's going to be who's assigned.
Well, go behind the scenes, folks. Go behind the scenes. John F. Kennedy had talked about going to the moon,
Mhm.
because it was hard and all those but, Kennedy was aware that we were already on the moon.
Mhm.
Kennedy was aware that we already had people on Mars
Mhm.
in 1963.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well known that there was a whole colony of people on Mars, as certainly as early as 67. And
Yeah.
so what Trump's doing here is kind of continuing the popular exposure to people in general from a source which people would find to be believable. That's what it amounts to. I mean, for crying out loud, you're looking at all these logos that are being suggested here and all this kind of stuff, which is totally ridiculous.
Oh, totally. This
Because
is,
we've had flying saucers
yeah,
since the 50s. The
propulsion.
U.S. government has had flying saucers since the 50s. I saw one in the summer of 1966. It come just cruising right along.
Yeah.
I mean, big deal. Okay.
Yeah.
But this business here of giving some kind of a logo indicating we're still going to use rockets to go anywhere
Yeah.
is completely ludicrous.
That's the problem. It's like, how can we go into the next, in the next era and still be using combustion engines and things, rockets? It's not realistic. So this was posted on their Twitter page, and they're asking people to vote, and I voted none of them because
Yeah,
of the reason what Winston just said. They're all rockets.
it's all stupid.
And of course, you still have some, you have the serpent tongue fork here, that represents the reptilians who
Yeah,
control
it's
the
hard to
state.
see some of them, but
Yeah, exactly. So I just kind of felt like, this isn't exactly, look, they just can't be honest if it kills them, really. So they don't want the, population knowing, having the knowledge, having the information. So that's too bad. And so humanity, well, anyway, but the fact that we created the Space Force is good news. At least,
well,
we'll
we
see.
didn't create anything. We're simply publicizing rudimentary elements of something that's been in operation for a very long time. I mean, solar warden has been in operation
Yes.
since Eisenhower.
Yeah. Well, for the sleepwalkers, this is new. So
It
we're
could be.
just,
It could be. Like I say,
yeah.
it's unfortunate. See. Here's one of the things that happened, and I think it was poor judgment, and that was in order to fund. Now, I personally believe that there was and is a threat, from outside sources, outside of our solar system, outside of our galaxy, and all kinds of different places. There is a threat.
Hmm.
Now, what the original Majestic 12 people and all those were doing, what was they were trying to avoid uh, public panic, much like what H.G. Stupid Wells did with his radio broadcast. And that was a psyop. They were trying to see what would happen if people, panicked over something like that. But it was all handled improperly.
Hmm.
And so Majestic 12 and all those kind of operations and so forth, secret space program, uh, were turned into black ops. But the problem was
Yeah.
the funding of it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if they had come out early on and told the people on the planet, we have threats, real threats, and here's the evidence of it that we're dealing with, and we need money to build the equipment and the technology to push back that threat, then the people would have said, well, yes, we'll
Yeah.
contribute to it. We'll work in the industry. We'll do all these kind of things. But what did they do?
Mm.
They turned to black funding in the form of drugs and even the mortgage foreclosure industry.
Mm.
People are being put out of their homes to fund the secret space program, for crying out loud. And that's why, as Solutions in Commerce, when we were trying to keep people in their homes and we were fighting foreclosures and stuff in the court, and we couldn't figure out, why things didn't work, because technically they should have worked the way that we had projected through the courts and through operations we're doing. But what we didn't realize until Catherine Austin Fitts came along and explained the accounting for it, we didn't realize that the judges weren't the final answer on the foreclosures. It was the secret space program. It was the CIA. It was Majestic 12 and those above that. They needed funding. Well, why in the hell didn't they just come out and say, we got a space threat, we need money, here's how much money we need?
Because it would blow the whole cover. Like Cobra said, it would blow their whole cover, that everything would come out then, the whole existence of the ETs. But they did say this. Mattis said this yesterday in this press conference. So, if any, for those with ears to hear, and mine certainly were, so I heard him say the same thing you're just saying. But they're not, but are people listening today? So he said there is a threat in space. He said that. But were
Of
people
course,
listening?
there always has been.
I know, but I'm saying that he's made it public now. But anyway, so I wanted to just kind of share that because we are ready, Winston, to stop, pretending. Let's pull the curtain back, and enough is enough. Let's get on with,
Well,
our evolution on the planet.
the threat historically, if you go back in history, centuries and centuries ago, every time there was a major outbreak of some disastrous disease, Black Plague or whatever, there was always associated with that a lot of UFO sightings. And what it appeared was that these UFOs who had come in, maybe, inadvertently had brought with them some kind of virus or something that was detrimental to human life. And so there's always been a threat. And so it's just within, the 20th century that we have developed the technology to prevent some of those things from happening. Now, you recall one of the reports we had done that we hadn't posted back up had to do with the round wing aircraft,
Right.
And the development of it. And so once those things were developed, then the Venusians allowed the people on Earth, and it was a conglomeration. It wasn't just the United States, but they allowed people on Earth to participate in the defense of Earth in what was known as solar warden. And we've had ships up in the solar system for 40, 50 years, defending the planet from any kind of problem that would come along. And then you had the what was called the secret space program, which was a result of something else, and it was controlled by Black Ops, CIA, and all those kind of things. But again, if people are simply informed of the truth, they won't panic.
Yeah.
They won't panic, but they will panic if you keep something hidden from them and they find it out.
Yeah, keeping things hidden from people isn't a good idea, really. And then they find out
Well,
because
with no oversight, then they're ripping it off.
no need to do it.
What's the cost of a TR-3B? What does it cost to build one of those
Well,
things?
there's no reason to do it. The truth
Well, that's
is
what I'm
not.
saying. Without any kind of oversight, instead
People,
of it costing $1 billion, saying no, it costs $3 billion. But where'd the other $2 billion go?
well,
That's what
people
I
are,
want to
I
know.
know, but people are going to be upset that they were lied to.
I'm upset.
More than, well, that's always the case, is that you're upset that you were deceived, that it was hidden from you rather than what the truth actually is. So, that's unfortunate. So I just wanted to, well, thanks for your comments on that, Winston. Before we get on to our program today, I wanted to just screen share one more thing, which is our website. So folks, if you're trying to find our reports, and we've had some viewers comment that they've had some trouble accessing the audio on some of the videos, or it came up not found or whatever. Sometimes you might have to open it up in a different browser because there's some browsers, and of course we're being shadow banned as well. On our webpage here, you can see if you want to access us on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is right here. Okay, just scroll down, and all of our channels are right here. However, if you want to access the POTUS reports, you have to access them from our webpage, the POTUS reports on YouTube, because they have to be uploaded as unlisted. It's the only way to keep Fetzer on YouTube. Otherwise, there's no way Fetzer and my POTUS reports are going to stay on YouTube. So, and they are shadow banned as well. So, you know, it's up to you guys to help spread this information and get the information out there. Here's the archive, the link for the archive channel for our previous reports, because, you know, we had to do this since they deleted our channel and never restored it. YouTube deleted our channel and, you know, obviously created great damage to us by having to do it like this, and to you as well, because now you have to go to several different places to find your reports. So but you know, we're tenacious and we are going to stand our ground and we are going to continue. So here's our Patreon page, here's our donate button for PayPal, and here's of course our Twitter page, so you can access everything. Here's our Facebook news page, and here's all the links to our videos and blogs and everything else. So if you access links from this page, they are official. If you don't, they may not be official. So there are, you know, bootlegged channels out there, and you know, I don't know what people are doing with the videos. I don't know if people are editing, splicing. Who knows? All I can tell you is we don't monetize. On our blog, you might see like an ad because it's a free blog. So there might be actually an ad on the page, but not on the videos, never on our videos. So I don't like commercials myself, and I don't like, you know, to put that into our videos. So we're going to get started. Winston today is going to be talking about limited liability, which is, you know, a concept that keeps coming up. And he's going to talk about it in a historical concept of some people who started introduced and developed some of these concepts, including insurance and things of that nature. So I'll hand it over to Winston.
Well, okay. Like I say, you almost got me riled up again this morning
I
with
know,
all this
pretty
stuff.
early, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it's true, and that is, I myself do not appreciate people deceiving me purposely.
Right.
And like I say, I saw, a flying metallical craft in the summer of 1966, and at that time I couldn't explain it.
Mm-hmm.
But now, now that I've researched and found all these different things over the years, it's obvious to me that it was a government craft.
Yeah. Oh.
It wasn't from another world or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I say, I was 18 at the time. Now here I am, 42, 43 or 53 years later.
Well, I saw one, let's see, about 20 years ago, 25, maybe 25 years ago, and it was green.
Yeah. Green?
It was bell-shaped. It was greener, brighter green than a green of a traffic light, and it was on an overcast day. So, you know, and I was out.
That probably was from another world.
Yeah, and it was near a quarry.
Yeah, as far as I know, the ones that the U.S. has are not that way. For instance, James Gilliland showed me a picture. It was really good close up of a ship that had come over the ranch, very low level, and it was green. He said it was actually biological. In other words, the ship itself was alive.
Oh, interesting.
And it was being piloted, I think he said, by Pleiadians, things like that. But these metallic things we see, I don't think that the U.S., the Earth people and the things that they're making and so forth have arrived at a technology beyond simply metallic ships. I don't think so. For instance, you see, there's all kinds. Just go on the internet, man. There's all kinds of videos and everything of those TR-3Bs, and I talked to Randy about that, and he told me all about them. We have not arrived at the point where we can create a biological interplanetary vehicle. We just haven't done that yet, and whether that's necessary or not, even for what we need, I don't know. But what is obvious is that we have been had detrimental effects all the way back from centuries ago by interplanetary visitors who bring such things probably inadvertently, such as the Black Plague and things like that. We don't need that. I mean, here on the planet Earth, especially back, centuries ago when people were very, very vulnerable to those kind of things. And so, like I say, yeah, we do need protection. But why is it that they think they need to hide it? Because so they can control it.
Right. Well, plus people are going to want rides. I mean, they want Star Trek. And why wouldn't we? But
they can go to Disneyland if they want to and stuff like that. But what I'm concerned with is that because of the secrecy and the subterfuge involved in it, people are being cast out of their homes for foreclosure. They're living on the street. They're living in tents, because of the subterfuge. And then the next problem is we have cocaine, we have heroin, we have opium flooding the streets and stuff like that to pay for all these black operations. Why in the hell don't they come out and tell the people, here's what we need?
Because they don't care about us, Winston.
Well, apparently not. That's what I'm saying.
They don't care. They use us.
So,
we're a farm. We're a farm.
Being one of the hillbilly types and stuff like that, I'm for the people.
Yeah.
I'm for the little guy. And when I see the little guys being tromped on by those who are using lies and subterfuge, then I get very upset with it. And so there is a better way. There is a better way to accomplish what needs to be accomplished, but they need to be open and transparent about what they're doing, because all it does, when all these people, started snooping around, started looking at different things, and they looked at the military budgets, and they found out the military was paying $500 for a toilet seat. What did that cause in people? They said, well, the military is wasting our money. Well, they weren't wasting it. The $500 toilet seat, $495 of that went into the secret space program. But why didn't they tell the people that, so that they would not have distrust and all these kind of things for what was happening in the military and their budgets and stuff? See, it causes the people not to have confidence. And when you lose the confidence of the people, the whole structure is weakened. And so, my position is full disclosure. I mean, you don't need to be worried about saying on your books that you're paying $500 for a toilet seat. Just tell us the truth. Toilet seat costs $5. The other $495 is going over here to build a TR3B.
Right.
Hello.
Actually,
and so the people say, well, why do we need a TR3B? To protect us from invaders. I mean, Randy was, go back and listen to what Randy was talking about. I mean, the last 3 years of his 20 and back program, he was a pilot.
Yeah.
He was running a fighter. I don't know what you call those things. A fighter UFO. And he said, it was very common for ships or whatever to come into the solar system or around the moon or whatever. He said it wasn't a problem. He said mostly we'd just go out and challenge them. He said they would leave for the most part. But then there are some that come in, and I would recommend to people to go get there's a 3-volume set of novels that Sean David Morton put out, and he put them out in novel form to explain what was happening and the threat that was apparent with the 2012 alignment and how it was overcome. Now, he put those out in novel form based on information that was given to him, and that's the reason Sean's in prison right now.
Right.
Well, the government tried to give him to give up all those original documents that were given to him, and he wouldn't do it. That's the reason Sean's in prison. They're trying to leverage him to get those originals away from him, and he used those originals to create a 3-volume series called Sands of Time,
Mm-hmm.
and it tells that story in novel form, but it's not fiction.
Right.
It's not fiction.
Okay. Well, I also wanted to just make the distinction between the U.S. Space Force and the Air Force. They're not the same. It's a different branch. So people who think that this is being run by the Air Force, it is not. So it is different. So the Air Force, I guess, previously had the secret space program, but what they're proposing is a 6th branch that's official. That's what the difference is. And I think it's good for the people to see that. But when you hear, more and more now, I also talked about a research paper I did in graduate school about the laws that they were passing to do asteroid mining. So we're talking about space commerce, and we're talking about things that people are not, concepts. And this was a couple of years ago, and I did publish that on the Canary Chronicles blog, and I think also on the GoldFish Report blog, and I may repost that again because it was.
Well, that's been the whole point of these series of interviews that we've done, was to say to people, how in the world do you think that you're going to do commerce with people from other places who don't do it this way?
Right.
And I was trying to, get people in the mindset so that they could have an intercommercial relationship with people from other places if they had the opportunity. Now, again, back from the grassroots and stuff, some of our earthlings have been doing commerce, for a very long time with interstellar and all those kind of things. Randy talked about it, going to some big, trade mart on some place there, near Saturn. He told me all about it. I think he's interviewed and told those stories and stuff. He went to, it was kind of like a big trade fair or something like that. And he talked about all the different kinds of entities are there, little old small people and a great big huge guy, and there were interdimensionals and all kinds of people doing commerce at that place. And so it's been going on for a very, very long time. It's just the people generally have not been exposed to it because we're trying to protect, first off, this idea, that people can't stand the truth. It doesn't be pure, listen to me, nothing but pure bullshit.
Exactly.
It's nothing but pure bullshit, because what they're trying to do is deceive the people so that they can control the commerce for their own whatever.
Self-gain.
And the ICC, guess who run the ICC? Dick Cheney and what's his name? Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
And they're two of the main ones that was involved in 9/11, taking down the Twin Towers, for crying out loud. People need to take all these different things and put them together so they can establish what the intent and what the direction is that things are going.
Yeah. And he said that they use these space-based, directed energy weapons.
Of course they did.
In order to drill, you see the rubble, you see these two big, like, almost looked like huge beams that were just.
It wasn't gravity; it was push from above.
Right.
Because the buildings deteriorated and fell faster.
Yeah. Than even a demolition. I know. And there could have been some nukes involved too, because there was, but there's lots of caustic stuff down there. But we'll just keep, this, we could talk about this. If you want to keep talking about it, that's okay.
I really don't.
Okay. But no, it's true. What the point is that you're making is that this is about ultimately space commerce. So, but we've got to get it right here though first. And
that's what I was saying, that we can't continue to do our commerce and the things that we do in the way that we have been doing them, because it's not acceptable other places.
I know, but we don't have control over that, Winston.
Yes, we do.
Well, we do and we don't. We have people who are manipulating everything in our life to keep us from having that control.
That's why we're doing with these reports, to expose those things.
Yeah, well,
that's why you're being shadow banned. That's why they're knocking you off YouTube. That's why they're blasting you with electronic weaponry. People don't know this, and it's not, maybe not for her to say, but I'll say it. Louisa has been under constant electronic warfare. They're trying to fry her brain. And this has been a constant battle for her. People don't, people see Louisa's smiling face that comes on to the reports and all that kind of stuff. But folks, listen to me flat out. She's getting the hell knocked out of her on a daily basis. You should be praying for her. And so, some of us, who have experienced some of those kind of things and so forth, this is real. This is real. This is not made up. This is not fiction. This is not science fiction, all that kind of stuff. A lot of us, Louisa, and I'm not going to talk about all my problems, but I'm just trying to tell you, many of us who are trying to expose these things and bring them to people's attention so they would know about it are getting the hell knocked out of us. And then we come back, still have a Friday morning smile on our face, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult to continue this. And so for those who, have supported financially, that's great. But we mainly ask, for people to support us, through your prayers and good energy that you would send. Because, like I say, I hardly talk to Louisa ever. But what, she's got hit again. And then we had Scott Warner on a few times, and he talked about actually getting killed on a number of occasions. Poor old James Gilliland, like I say, I don't know how that man even walks the earth.
Yeah, and
they literally blast the hell out of him all the time.
Yeah, and that we have, remember that interview we did with Scott where they were attacking the computer as we were doing it?
That was real. It happened in real time. People saw it.
Could hear it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they fried your electronics, which caused the tumble down thing, and we're finally getting back to the point where we have your electronics in such a shape that we can produce a good product.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't realize what went on in the background just to keep this program going. You really don't know that. But Louisa and those of us who have participated with her, we know it. We know what it's taken. Mm-hmm. And without her strength, without her determination, it would have been easy for her to say, heck with it, I quit, I give up, and just walk away. It would have been easier for her to do that than continue on. So we are here, folks. We're holding the energy. We're holding the position. We need your support to continue these things on. Because like I say, I mean, what what profit, do we see from this? There ain't no profit from what we do. We can barely just manage to keep things, going and stuff like that.
Like you said.
But we don't expect a profit from it.
No, not doing it for a profit. That's not why we're doing it. We have a higher, it's a higher calling. You either hear.
That's what we came on the planet for.
Yeah, you either know you have it or you don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know where I came from. I know where Louisa came from. We volunteered to come here. We didn't have to come, but we did come. And so while we're here, then we'll do the best we can. Like I say, that the jerks killed me back in, March.
Yeah.
And luckily the line beings come along and said, no, right. Sorry, Winston, we're going to have to fix you because you're not done yet.
Right.
And so they fixed me up, and so I'm sitting here talking today. Otherwise, I'd have left and gone someplace else. But there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us on the planet, and not just here, on the internet and stuff. But there's a lot of people on the planet, who are working in these areas and stuff. And so again, we're doing it for the benefit of others. It's service. It's not service to self. It's service to others, and that's why we do it. And so, like I say, do we take hits? daily.
All the time. And not just even electronically. I mean, we're doing, it's energetic and so it sometimes works through other people. So we have it in other aspects of our life as well through, they use certain systems to attack us as well, like the
Yeah.
courts, which is
Oh, yeah.
why we know them so well, and
Yeah.
how
So
it
we try to
operates.
expose those things so that people would understand, the dilemma that we face. It may not be that dramatic in the lives of most people, probably not, but they need to be exposed to it so they'll see the effort that's being made and be supportive of it.
On their behalf, because we already know this.
Yeah.
We don't need to, we
I
don't
don't need this stuff.
we could talk
I just know
amongst
about it.
ourselves, but
Well,
we're not. We could talk about it amongst ourselves and keep it to ourselves, but that's not who we are. We're
no,
in service to others, and so we share it with others. So,
sure.
but I appreciate your kind words and acknowledging, because it is, I never talk about personal things on Goldfish Report, and maybe at the right time, maybe those things will become a topic of conversation. But it's we're at war. We're at war,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
it's no sense in talking about how awful it is, because it's war. It's awful.
Yeah, it is. And like I say, we do appreciate the support of others.
Hmm.
Especially your good thoughts, your prayers, your energies that you send. Like I say, if we just had to stand alone, we couldn't make it. We couldn't.
Hmm.
And so I get so many emails from people, that say how much they appreciate our efforts. They're sending good energy, they're sending prayers, they're sending good intentions and things like. And
Yeah.
without that, we'd been destroyed a long time ago. So
Yep.
anyway, with that in mind,
Okay.
I wanted to go over some historical things. And the reason why I do a lot of this historical stuff is because certainly, unless you've been exposed to where some of these problems have come from, we might have the tendency to try to repeat them. For instance, from time to time, I talk to different ones and they're saying, well, what we would really like to do is go get a piece of land and join with others and build a community. And I keep saying, oh no, not again, not again, because actually, when I hear people start off with those conversations, it's almost word for word like they're under mind control. When I hear people express that particular thought, it's almost word for word. I keep thinking,
Yeah.
why would I keep hearing the same expressions, the same sentences, the same words almost verbatim? And the only conclusion I've drawn from it is that there's some kind of mind control, something floating around that rests in people's brains and they express it that way.
Well, it's Operation Mockingbird. I mean, everything is scripted through the.
Not that particular thing.
Oh,
Not
okay.
that particular thing.
Well, that's now we're at a point where To Kill a Mockingbird. Now
Yeah.
this is what Q is behind, and the president is To Kill the Mockingbird, which is the Mockingbird media from Project Mockingbird, which
Yeah,
is
I
part of
understand
mind.
that.
But that's where the mind control starts. It was through the television.
Yeah, well, let's go back over some of the history a little bit
Hmm.
so people would understand where some of these thought processes had come from. Because a lot of people, talk to anybody, say, well, do you know who George Rapp was? No. Do you know who Robert Owen was? No. And so you say, well, how can you possibly understand our present limited liability insurance and all that kind of stuff if you don't know those names? And people don't know those names. They haven't seen that in history yet. So I want to expose a little bit of that today so that people would have some historical basis for understanding what we've been involved in, because again, we don't want to repeat those same mistakes. And so as an example of that, I had mentioned, various people would just out of clear blue sky tell me that we want to, go get a piece of land and we want to develop with other people. I mean, almost word for word. Now, if they had it, all these different ones who had said this had expressed it in different ways, I might not have been so concerned. Well, almost word for word.
Yeah.
Almost word for word. I keep thinking,
Where's
you
this
know,
coming from, right?
there's something floating around that lodges in people's brains to give them that idea. Now, is there anything wrong with the concept? The answer is no. But the question is, how would you go about establishing that concept? And I have had some experience in those areas. I have had, the concept of intentional communities comes up. And, and there's a lot of them in existence. Some of them seem to be fairly successful. Others, break apart. And so, what would cause, one community to be successful, and what would cause another community to break apart? And so those are some of the things that we would want to investigate. And that's what I'm, kind of doing today, is to bring some of that history to the table so that people can, look back and say, okay, here's what was tried in the past. Would I want to repeat that unsuccessful attempt? Well, certainly not. But are there elements and so forth that would lead to a successful interchange of people in a community who had the same intent? Now, for instance, there was a fellow that came to one of my seminars. It's been some number of years ago, and he was involved in technically an intentional community. They were down in Northern California, and among other things, they were they were actually raising seed crops of what would we call heritage type
Oh,
seeds.
yeah.
And
Non-GMO. Non-GMOs.
yeah, it seemed like, because they had not only a common intent, but they were vigorously uh, working. That's what seemed to be the glue that held them all together. Because again, they were not familial. In other words, some communities that I've observed over the years, they were successful because they were family. In other words, they have blood relations. And so we, like I say, I've looked at a lot of these things over the years to see what could cause a successful community and what would, tear it down. So those are some of the things I would like to look at today. Probably some of your viewers and listeners and so forth may be involved in an intentional community. And so, the question would get to be, hopefully, can we historically analyze what has happened? And then from that, could we, you know, uh, perhaps do a little bit better if that's what we're involved in? Now, one of the things that's happened in our country, because of the economics and the social movements and all those kind of things, is the breakdown of families. And like I say, I've looked at some of these intentional communities and so forth, and the ones that I have seen, which appear to be more successful than some of the others, is because of family relations. Family relations, and almost all of them were based upon patriarchal family rule. And so, anyway, let's let me just do a little quick quiz here, and so you have to get unmuted now because I'm going to ask you a question.
Oh, you're right. I was muted. Okay. Yeah, I was
Yeah,
wrong.
yeah, yeah. Okay,
Uh-oh.
so this is kind of a riddle, not like some of the others, but but it should provoke thought, and that is, what is the largest cause of car accidents in the United States? What would you think would be the largest cause?
Uh, I don't know. The weather?
Okay, weather. What would be another contributor?
Uh,
Texting.
sure.
How about putting
Distracted.
on how about putting on
Well,
lipstick while you're driving?
anything that distracts you, anything you do while you're driving that distracts you.
Hmm. Okay, those are all wrong.
Shaving. Shaving,
Those are all wrong.
eating ham and cheese sandwiches, you know. That's the law we
Okay.
have. We have the ham sandwich law.
Well, I'm going to surprise you with what the real reason for the majority of accidents in the country is. It's car insurance.
You always know how to come out of left field, Winston. That's okay.
No, the biggest cause of car accidents in the United States is car insurance. Now, why would I say that? Because again, you're getting involved in limited liability. And that is, I might pose the question, what if people had full liability and full responsibility for their actions? Mm-hmm. Would they drive the way they do? No.
Well, there'd still be some accidents because people.
Well, there would still be some, but what I'm saying is.
Right, it caused a lack of responsibility, like a carelessness, because you're not totally liable for what happens. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so what I'm saying is the biggest cause of traffic wrecks in the United States is because of car insurance, which is limited liability. Now, that's something for people to think about.
Is that part of the benefit privilege?
Well, yeah, it's part of that. But what I'm saying, limited liability causes people to act in a certain way that they would not act in if they were not involved in limited liability. Yes. That's my point.
Yes, if they took full responsibility.
Yeah, and so again, as we start to talk about, we spend a lot of time talking about the public versus the private. On the private side, it's full responsibility. On the public side, it's limited responsibility. Because again, what happens under limited liability is the government comes in and says, okay, we'll take, a portion of the liability for what the citizens do. In other words, we're going to create a black hole over here. And we're going to allow people to act in limited liability so that they're not totally responsible for what actions they take. And so, but they foul the whole program up. I mean, again, like I say, I always go back to the plan of the experts and the collateral accounts and the global debt facility and the Negotiable Instruments Act and all those kind of things. So, I have arrived at certain conclusions based on the information and knowledge that I've gotten over the years about these things.
Right.
And so as a sociologist, if I can use that word, I try to expose these things so that people can take a view of it to say, okay, now we have more information about a certain thing. Do we still want to act the way that we did? And you may want to. Or do we want to change the way we've acted and start acting a different way? And so in a certain respect, what I have tried to do, as Solutions in Commerce or whatever, is to try to get people to stand up for themselves, self-responsibility.
Yeah, you didn't only learn how to train a chicken to dance in college.
That's true. All right. So again, when as we've had our discussions and things, when we've talked about the private versus the public, you can't take limited liability on the private side. It will not exist there. It's full liability, and that's why I was promoting this interview that was done with this pilgrim, because again, you put your pack on your back, you take off walking, across wherever, and it's just you and God. It's just you and God. So you got to be totally responsible. And so if your feet start hurting, you sit down and rest. If you get a blister, you deal with it. If you're hungry, you go find something to eat. Nobody's going to come out and say, okay, here, let us do this, let us do that for you. And so again, I really, really was so impressed with the comments that were made because she was talking total self-responsibility. And so we would like to, while we're here on this planet, get into a position where at least for a little bit, maybe a pilgrimage or maybe something else, where we actually put ourselves into a position where we have the experience of total self-responsibility, total self-reliability. And very few people ever experience that. Very few people. And so, in what we've tried to, bring across to people is to, hey, at least sometime in your life, have the experience, have that experience of being totally responsible for your own actions. And see what people don't realize about limited liability. If you go out here and produce something based on limited liability, will you be able to fully realize the effect of that? And this is what Ayn Rand was talking about in her novels. I mean, this what Reardon, whatever his name was, this guy standing in front of the court. He says, "Well, he said I did it. He said I built the steel industry. I built the steel. I did all these kind of things. He said I made the money. Why shouldn't I have it?" And the court was saying, "Well, nobody should be that rich." He said, "Why not? I did it. I built it. I sold it. Get your nose out of my business." Because Reardon, or whatever his name was, he was acting totally on the private side. Right. I think Ayn Rand was trying to point that out. Right. And so, like I say, we have become so accustomed to living in limited liability that people don't know anything else. And so if you have to experience it, going on a pilgrimage, if you have to experience it, using a commercial lien, if you have to experience it, whatever way, at some time in your life, folks, live in full liability, if for no other reason, just so you can say you did it for 10 minutes or 10 hours or a month. Do that sometime, just see if you don't like it a whole lot better than what you dealt with. Because we have absolutely look at the results of not taking responsibility for your own health. Just go to a medical doctor who are limited medical professionals. Like I say, this one fellow I talked to, he had gone to a doctor. He had some kind of stomach ulcer or some kind of problem in his stomach, and he went to the medical doctor. The medical doctor said, well, he just gave him, what the accepted thing was, and the doctor knew full well it wasn't going to heal this guy. So this guy left. He was on his way out through the parking lot. The nurse came running out and said, the doctor couldn't tell you this in his office, but let me tell you how to fix the problem you have. It was real simple. So the guy went and applied what was said, and he got healed from it. But if he had simply applied what was said in the doctor's office under limited curability, it would not have gotten better. Now you're on mute again. But anyway,
okay. Sorry about that.
Today I want to go into a little bit of history so you see where these concepts have come from. And you might be surprised. At how we have come to the point that we're at today, but it's all very historical. So I want to screen share some of the different articles and things, that I've found over the years that, might be helpful to people. Now, let me see for a minute which one I want to look at first. Okay, let's see.
Well, I guess that's where the concept of, you have to take responsibility You know, when you're a child, you don't have, you know, you're not expected to have, you know,
No,
responsibility. But the question is, when do you stop being a child and when do you start taking full responsibility for yourself? And I think that's probably, it sounds like how our system kind of came about, because if you don't claim yourself to be an adult, then you're not going to be considered an adult. And
no.
and you'll be, yeah, okay. So this is where all that probably came from.
Yeah, a lot of it did.
Yeah.
Now, just as an example, because of the perils at sea, because most of the commerce,
Right.
had to do with transportation across the oceans.
Mm-hmm.
There were caravans, that went across the land, but many of the admiralty concepts were based
Mm-hmm.
upon the irretrievability of cargo that was lost at sea.
Mm, right.
And these are interesting concepts. They're concepts that came of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if you were in a wagon train, and one of the wagons had a load of, let's say, gold bullion, gold coins on it,
Mm-hmm.
and something happened, it was attacked, or whatever, gold coins were recoverable on the land using normal procedures. But if a ship went down that was carrying bullion and sank into the depths of the ocean, in 1851, they had absolutely no way to retrieve that. So the concepts of insurance came up, as a method to deal with the loss. So in 1851, the Congress of the United States enacted Limited Liability Act as amended. The purpose of this act was to limit the liability for the payment of debt of persons who were ship owners involved in maritime commerce. This act was the result of the U.S. Supreme Court decision titled the New Jersey Steam Navigation Company versus the Merchants Bank. Again, in 1851, if cargo was lost at sea, there was absolutely no way for them to retrieve that. And so, of necessity, because of the lack of technology for recovery,
Mm-hmm.
they came up with some of these things, which, again, I mean, they were simply trying to protect commerce. That's what they were trying to do. So, anyway, it talks about, some of the provisions of that act. And, like I say, you can send me an email and ask me for this, or I'll send it to you, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But this again is part of our history. And then we'll get into Tontine, but this Act of 1851 is nothing more than the old maritime rule administered in courts of admiralty in all the countries except England from time immemorial. And if it were not so, the subject matter itself is one that belongs to the Department of Maritime Law. All right. So these are where the concepts of insurance have come from in many respects. It also has to do with what's known as contribution.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had talked about contribution a little bit. And again, let me describe contribution. And that is, let's say that there were 6 merchants that were shipping goods on a particular ship. And the ship went out on the ocean. It got into a storm. It was in peril of sinking. So they started to jettison cargo overboard to save the ship. And if they were successful and the ship made it to harbor, then the other merchants whose cargo had not been jettisoned, they had to make it up to the merchant whose stuff was thrown overboard. Now, that's a common concept in Admiralty Maritime. And so has it ever happened in our time? Yeah. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as President of the United States, jettisoned the gold bullion of the country into the collateral account. And so now what's expected of all the citizens is called contribution. So anyway, we see
Okay.
some of these things, interesting parallels of how things are handled in commerce and so forth. And so, do you have any questions or comments about that?
No, I think it's pretty clear. It really does. Am I on mute? No. I think it really does help to understand that the intentions were not. They came out of the need. These systems,
Necessity.
yeah, were derived out of necessity, but they were hijacked. But
Yeah.
that's different. That's a different issue than the fact
Yeah.
that how they were created, and they were really created with the intent, a different intent. The intent was to not only out of necessity, but to solve
Exactly.
a problem. Okay.
Now we're going to get into something here. There's one article about what's called Tontine Insurance. Then we're going to go into some of the history of it. Let me just give it a little quick rundown here. It says, in order to evade the usury laws, which had prevented the growth of a funded system of national insurance, governments have frequently resorted to the issue of annuities and child endowments as a means of raising funds. Oh, really?
Hmm.
Is that what the birth certificate's all about? Hmm. The tontine was a somewhat later development, having been put into operation in France in 1689. It took its name from that of the originator, which was Lorenzo Tonti, a Neapolitan by birth, who was attracted to Paris. Blah blah blah. In its original form, the tontine was a loan in which the premium was never to be repaid, but the entire interest on the loan was to be divided each year among the survivors or the original subscribers.
Mm.
Now, we're going to get into some of the history here in the United States with this George Rapp Society and also with Robert Owen and New Harmony. And a lot of people haven't heard of that. But anyway, we're going to talk about that a little bit from a historical perspective to see the influence of tontine in the United States, not only in government but also in commerce. Chief characteristic or trademark of tontine is that a pool of assets is divided among the survivors at the options of those subscribers who dropped out or did not survive until the time for distribution had arrived. It was a wagering policy, just like that of the George Rapp Society. The Equitable Life Insurance Company in 1868 introduced the deferred dividend system, which was really an application of the tontine principle. The most serious flaw in the deferred dividend system was the inability of the insured to compel an accounting. The general rule is that the policyholder is not entitled to compel the company to account for dividends, nor can the policyholder compel the distribution of the surplus funds in any other manner or at any time, or in any other amounts that provided for in the contract. I'll give you, for instance, when I was a young person, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11, or however, my mother was looking to the future, and she went and purchased an insurance policy for all three of us children. It wasn't very large, but it was a life insurance policy. I think the policy was, I don't know, I can't even remember now, maybe $5,000 or $10,000, which was a lot of money back in the 50s, I guess you would say. Anyway, she paid those premiums, for 20 years when it matured.
Mhm.
Now, she didn't have knowledge of life insurance, or certainly we couldn't do anything about it because she was the purchaser. But when she passed away, then those life insurance policies were a part of inheritance. So I inherited the insurance policy that she had paid for because the premium payment was for 20 years, just like what they're saying here with this deferred premium. And then guess what? Guess what happened? What had happened that we had no knowledge of. The insurance company, the life insurance company themselves had gone bankrupt.
Oh, Of
And so
course.
when that was challenged under probate by the attorney who looked into that, then all of a sudden, there was a portion of that policy. I think eventually from that policy, I got something like, I don't know, 15. Let's just say $1,500 on a $5,000 insurance policy that should have been paying premiums ever since it matured, and it didn't. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
So that's why we say that insurance is a risk. It's a gamble. A life insurance policy is basically just you're gambling that you're going to die before the thing matures. That's all you're doing.
Mhm.
And in some cases where you have a good, strong insurance company, there's benefits that can be gotten from it. But again, the only way you're really going to, get the good stuff from a life insurance policy is if you die before it matures. That's what it amounts to. Yeah, if you go back into some of our current events, this Stroke fella and these other people that were involved in the FBI trying to get after Trump, what did they say we got over here? Said we got an insurance policy.
Right, exactly. Mhm.
It's always a gamble. It's always a risk.
Right.
Anyway, this is a pretty good article about Tontine and so forth. Um, aside from the moral quality of the matter concerning which I waive controversy, the considerations which the public aspect seem to me principally to invite are these. First, whether it is prudent to make of our insurance company great banking establishments.
Mm.
Well, some of these insurance companies, man, they're bigger than the banks. They probably own the banks for all I know.
Right. Well, what about Lloyd's of London? Lloyd's have the
Same thing.
insurance. Yeah, they have the insurance policies for these things.
Uh-huh.
Mhm. Don't
Yeah.
they hold isn't that who holds these trusts, these accounts?
Wait a minute.
The what do you call it? The heritage accounts and the global
It's
trust funds.
it's interesting you asked me that question.
It's what I'm here for. Stir things up.
Well, it just so happened that I was looking on uh,
Here we go. Huh.
this one website here.
Oh, that's our friend. They
Mm-hmm.
they publish our reports. This is energy on Ascension with Earth. Very good.
Uh-huh. Well,
Nice.
one of the things they point out down here, just because you brought it up,
Mm-hmm.
was let me see if I can find it real quick.
There, I saw it. Lloyd's. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
was it above what I've already passed over?
No, it's there. There it is. Just hold it still. It's right in the middle of the screen now.
Oh yeah, Lloyd's of London makes $5 million on your death via your birth certificate. Hospital gets 1 million of that. Says Big Pharma also cashes in on individual deaths. They hold a $1 million insurance policy on every American. All right, first off, this is all illegal.
Mm-hmm.
At one time, I had talked to an insurance adjuster,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, look, because he was independent, he was not a part of the insurance company. He was a private adjuster that they would hire to come in and pay off on claims. And so that he said there's certain things he said that we have to look at in order to pay off a claim. He said number one, was there a valid insurance policy in place at the time of the accident or whatever? And he said number two, he said who's the principal on the insurance policy? In other words, he says I can't go insure my neighbor's house from fire. He said because if the neighbor's house caught on fire,
Mm-hmm.
then they would be looking straight at me
Mm-hmm.
as a firebug. Now look here, you got Lloyd's of London, you got all these different ones who are taking out an insurance policy on me.
Right.
So if I die from taking some kind of pill, isn't that how can they collect an insurance policy when they're the ones that cause the vaccinations, the autism, and all this rest of that stuff. This is perfectly illegal. The Lloyd's of London, Big Pharma, or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
This is
Unethical, immoral,
illegal.
illegal, unethical, immoral.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's completely, yeah.
You can't take out an insurance policy on my health
Mm.
because if I get sick or if I die, then a good detective, they'd be looking right straight at whoever took out that insurance policy.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're doing at this point in our history.
Mm.
We're saying, why are Americans sick?
Right.
Why are the people dying?
Well, the next line tells you the answer. Doctors get 500,000 per chemo patient.
Yeah.
It looks like Big Pharma, as you said, has the, this is really, I don't know if I can believe everything in this report here that you shared.
I'm just saying, since you brought it up, I just
Yeah.
had this, I just up looking at this the other day, so I thought I'd bring it up.
Well, I was pretty, I don't know, there was some other, I had known from my research that Lloyd's was the holder of the.
Yeah. No one can insure against my death except me, or as a minor child, my mother did it.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only people that can insure my health and my death. It's either as a minor, a parent could do that, or as an adult, I can do it, or a member of my family.
Yeah.
But certainly no outside banking establishment or any of the rest of that foolishness could have anything to do with any of that. It ain't none of their damn business.
Yep.
All right. So let's get along a little bit. Like I say, I'm going to get worked up again here.
No.
And I really don't want to do that. So
That's
let's
not usual for you on a Friday to get this worked up over. It's okay.
But
It's okay.
when I see what's happened,
Yeah, I know.
because of this. Now, if Lloyd's of London is going to get $10 million from my death, what is the interest of Lloyd's of London in me? Mm-hmm. They're hoping I die.
Yeah.
Big Pharma. They're hoping I die.
They're helping it along. Yep.
The hospitals are hoping I get cancer so they can give me chemo.
This is why we're trying to say this is why they're harvesting us, they're using us, they're making money off us, they're commoditizing us. It is, you need to, and all of the secrecy, the space program, all of it is all part of it, of all, why they're wanting to hide that from us and not give us access to that technology.
Yeah, at some point, the people are going to say, we're sick and tired of it. We're not putting up with it anymore.
Right.
And that's why we have to have disclosure of all these things so that people will know, because how do you stop it? Cut off their money.
Right. Well,
nobody works for free. That's just a simple principle.
Well, the Trump executive order from December 21st is what that's about.
Exactly. All right, well, let's look at some more of the historical things here. Like I say, I don't want to get people too worked up.
Well, it's part of our reports. If we're not getting worked up, it's not worth talking about, Winston.
I guess.
We're not here to read nursery rhymes. We're here to get people worked up, just in the sense that we're informing. We're, providing information. And if you don't get worked up about it,
something wrong with you.
You're contributing to the problem. That's what you're doing. You're contributing to the problem if you're not getting worked up about it.
All right, let's look at this one here. This is something I had downloaded. I think it's on Wikipedia. You can find it on the internet. Just type in George Rapp, R-A-P-P. Now, George Rapp, I think he was from Germany. It says after leaving Germany and coming to the United States, they first settled and built the town of Harmony, Pennsylvania. What they were doing was they were creating basically a religious society, and then they had certain commercial principles that they were working with. So that was in Harmony, Pennsylvania, in 1804. Established the Harmony Society in 1805 as a religious commune.
Mhm.
Now, here's the drawback. In 1807, celibacy was advocated as the preferred custom of the community in an attempt to purify themselves for the coming millennium. There was a whole lot of excitement during that period of time about the second coming. I
Mm.
mean, they were basing some of their estimations based on the calculations that come out of the book of Daniel in the Old Testament. So that's where, what was her name? Mother Miller, eventually the Seventh-day Adventists came from that movement. And some of these others, the Quakers, were already in that. And then they had what's called the Shaking Quakers. I don't know, probably about 50 or 60 miles from where I grew up. There was a community. It means it's still there. I mean, there wasn't no people living there, but they still had the community. They were called Shaking Quakers. And that was that they would get the spirit and they would be shaking. I mean, it's kind of like the Pentecostals a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, they were advocating celibacy. They felt like that if everybody on the planet was dead, that Jesus could come. Give me a break. Who comes up with this weird stuff?
Mm.
But anyway, in this article here about George Rapp, they were basically taking the same concept that the Quakers was. And so anyway, Rapp was not a Quaker, but they had a few of those same concepts. All right, so he talks about, this article is talking about, some of the different things about them, but I wanted to get into their concept of tontine, because they were actually well known. They were actually well known. George Rapp's life was not without controversy and problems. Rapp and the Harmony Society were involved in protracted legal cases, many relating to the monetary claims by former society members who did not feel properly compensated for their time and labor. Other cases concerned the ownership and sale of property. All right, let me tell you how it operated. All right, so you got George Rapp here and a few others who were the first established investors in the society.
Okay.
And so basically they were operating a tontine situation for the founders. Now, when other people would become interested in their commune, they would come in and they would dedicate all of their assets into the society, which would make them literally, poor. All right. Now, over a period of time, those same ones who would come in would contribute labor, which produced, because these people were industrious. Germans are always industrious.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were producing textiles and all kinds of different things for sale. And the society itself became very, very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was noticed. I mean, some of the main, let's see, I think they have here some of the ones who came and looked at it. It doesn't have it in this article. Maybe it has one of the other articles. Anyway, Thomas Jefferson, and a couple of the John Adams, and several of the ex-presidents, and even the current president at that time, were taking a close look at what George Rapp was doing, because they were accumulating huge amounts of money, which was certainly needed in a new country that was trying to establish commercial and so forth. And so the leaders of the country were taking a real close look at George Rapp and what he was doing. So anyway, what had happened, the founders of the community, the society, and so forth were of one category, and that was a true tontine. but the other problem was they allowed other people to join the society who contributed their assets when they joined the society, and then they worked in the society, let's say, for a number of years. Now, if they became disenchanted with what was going on, they could certainly leave the community, but when they left, they could only recover whatever their initial input had been.
That's not fair.
And so the court cases that involved themselves were based on the society simply retaining the labor and the results of the labor of the people who were leaving.
Okay.
So that tontine had developed into something a little bit further than that.
It was a Ponzi scheme, really.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was a Ponzi. We ain't talking about Ponzi's now, but
Nah.
yeah. So what started out as a tontine developed, layers, and then the one layer developed into what you're calling a Ponzi scheme. See, this is the same problem that I had. I was involved in a religious society.
Was
involved in a religious society where I contributed, labor, money, all kinds of things. And then that religious society decided that they did no longer want me to be a part of their society. So they excommunicated me from it, but they did not give me back what I had contributed in the forms of tithes, offerings, and free labor. So when they kicked me out, I could not retrieve, just like these people in the George Rapp Society in this Ponzi scheme, they could not retrieve, what they had put into it. And so for those of you who are involved in religious societies and so forth, if you get kicked out the same way I got kicked out, don't expect to take anything with you. They made absolutely no offer. They just said, go away, leave, don't come back. So that's my story with the LDS Church. That's what happened to me. So like I say, let me get out. The sun's kind of getting up again. Let me get resituated here so that I don't have that problem with the sun. All right, so this is what a lot of the legal problems that came up with the George Rapp situation. Now let's look at some of the other articles here.
Well, that's what you put a sweat equity claim on them for.
Actually, I didn't do anything.
Yeah. But in I think in another situation, that's what a sweat equity claim is about.
Well, of course it is.
Yeah. A sweat equity claim, folks, look it up. Learning all kinds of great terms and things here.
Yeah, here's another thing. I just went online. This information is available all over the place. You just have to know, what to look for and stuff. But here's from again, I think it's Wikipedia. All right. So here's what happened with George Rapp. He had created that one society there in Pennsylvania. Eventually, because of whatever problems they were having, they went to Indiana, and they bought even a bigger place. I mean, something like, I don't know, 35 or 40,000 acres, 50,000 acres of land.
Wow.
And so they were expanding, but they were expanding on the same basis, was that they were able to purchase all that land based upon what?
Taking all your money.
There you go. And so again, anyway, because of, whatever the reasons were, religious, philosophical, or otherwise, the Rapp Society was willing to sell that property in Indiana, a place called Harmony. And so another guy from Scotland who had many of the same concepts, that they were talking about here, a guy named Robert Owen. So he come in and he bought up what the Rap Society had and started over again. I think he renamed the place. He called it New Harmony. Mm. Now it's an interesting concept. At that, in that historical period of time in the United States, there was a lot of this going on, a lot of it, and it affected Mormonism heavily. Mm. Several of the people who were converts to the what's called the LDS or the Mormon Church had a history with some of these societies and so forth. Some of your principal men who came in those early times had been Campbellites. And they were associated loosely with some of these same concepts. And so a lot of the early input into the Mormon Church, I'll just use the word Mormon. People know that name more than anything else. Mm-hmm. But anyway, a lot of those early ones who came in brought with them the same concepts from George Rapp and Robert Owen. And they brought that with them when they joined the Mormon Church, and then they started to have that kind of influence within the Mormon Church itself, which caused a great deal of problems. And the problem was that Joseph Smith, who was the founder, who was by nature a Rosicrucian, as they had migrated from New York into Ohio, Pennsylvania, anyway, they set up, they started a major movement to Missouri because they believed that's where the New Jerusalem would be started. And like I say, again, based upon some of the calculations that are to be found in the book of Daniel, they started to do certain things. And so in consequence of that, they had thought that they should establish themselves in the western borders of Missouri, which they did. And so they took the funds that had been accumulated and they bought up huge tracts of land in western Missouri. But then they started to do the same thing that Rapp and Owen had been doing, and that was that the people who came and who had contributed money into the project, when they came to this land, they were given an allotment, but the local bishop kept the title. So the title was vested in the local bishop, and those who had contributed and put up the money to purchase the land were only given were only given the possession and use of the land. And if there was any kind of controversy, then they would simply be kicked off. Now at this time, Joseph Smith was still in Ohio. And when he found out what was going on in Missouri, he blew his stack. He said, "We're not common stock. We're not a common stock society." And so what Joseph Smith was basically saying was, we're not doing the George Rapp. We're not doing the Robert Owen stuff. That don't work. And he literally threatened the bishop that was in western Missouri. He said, that's not the way this is designed. And so that there was, even in the early days of Mormonism, the influence of the Tontine, of the George Rapp, of the Robert Owen, almost destroyed the Mormon Church way back in the late 30s, 1830 period of time. Almost did. And so they finally got it straightened out, I guess. So they continued on. But anyway, during this period of time, the national sentiment,
Mm.
what was, this had a lot of influence. Now, so are we going to be able to translate some of this influence, down to our modern times? So anyway, this is an article I just, downloaded off the internet. I think there were a couple of things in here. Again, this Robert Owen, was still, trying to think of some of the things about, socialism and the Quakers and celibacy and all that kind of crazy stuff. Owen's philosophy was influenced by Sir Isaac Newton's view on natural law, also on Plato and some of these others. Uh,
Mm.
let's see. Oh, yeah, here's one of the things he introduced, which is quite interesting. That was he introduced the 8-hour workday in
Oh,
1810. We still have that today.
yeah. Now, why did he do that?
Well, his belief was, let's see, I think it goes into his belief here. Anyway, here's a statue of him there in England.
Mm.
Uh, well, okay, I can't find this now, but he believed you should work 8 hours a day, you should sleep 8 hours a day, and you should recreate 8 hours a day, which would give rise to art, music, and all these other things. In other words, people had to have 8 hours a day of free time to pursue whatever it was they wanted. So it's actually Robert Owen,
Mm.
because generally people certainly in the textile mills and other things and so forth in England and the United States or wherever, they were regularly working a 12-hour shift. So for those of you who are operating on an 8-hour shift, you can thank Robert Owen for that. Anyway, that's one of the good things he did. But I was trying to see here. There's some more some points. Now here's what they proposed as a city for this New Harmony expedition and so forth. Again, they gotten this from the rap society, Georgia Rap Society. All right. So this Josiah Warren, one of the participants in New Harmony, asserted that the community was doomed to failure due to a lack of individual sovereignty and personal property. In describing the Owenite community, Warren explained, "We had a world in miniature. We had enacted the French Revolution over again with despairing hearts instead of corpses as results.
Mm.
It appeared that it was nature's own inherent law of diversity that had conquered us. Our united interests were directed at war with the individualites of persons and circumstances and the instinct of self-preservation." And so what basically this Josiah Warren is saying here is that even though there were successes with some of these attempts and so forth, but there were also major thrusts against what we would call natural law, and that was personal sovereignty, personal property, and all those kind of things. So this Warren here, he postulated that was the cause of the failure.
Mm.
Then there's some other interesting things here. This is kind of complicated. Time-based currency, that's negotiable instruments. Anyway, let's see. Then Owen got into spiritualism. I mean, they were doing all kinds of interesting things, these folks. It's just real interesting, to read,
Mm-hmm.
what some of these different ones had done. Now let me see here. Uh, okay. I just have a bunch of articles here I thought would, get people to think about some of this.
Sure.
Uh,
Let's see. I think I had a question about it though. But what about so you're saying natural law? A lot of people are thinking that we're going to return to common law.
no,
Is that your understanding? I didn't think so. I don't know where they're getting that idea, but I think after these arrests occur, we know that the indictments are over 45,000. That
yeah,
report that you said there's to be expected to go up to maybe approximately around 80,000 by the end of the year, which is a little disappointing because, well, let's hope that they're acted on before then. But 80,000 is not disappointing in other words. But it just seems like I mean in other regards. But so I'm not sure where. I guess they're thinking that the whole government's going. We know that there's a new republic with Dunford at the head of it, but we don't know how the legal system's going to look. I don't know why
no,
they're
we don't.
going to go to common law. Yeah.
No, common law is historical law, and look what we've done in history. Do we want to repeat that?
Right.
I would think not.
No.
I think it'd be more along the lines of equity.
Yeah.
Again, NASARA, like I say, NASARA is still a big secret. I mean, we've seen some of the provisions of it and so forth, but we haven't read it yet. I haven't seen it. I mean, I don't know what Bill Clinton signed in 2000.
Mm.
I mean, I'd like to see it, but so far it's been kept from us. I mean, we talk about NASARA and all that kind of stuff, but we still haven't seen it. Am I going to approve and participate with it? I don't know.
Yeah. You have to see it.
Not until I see it first.
Right.
So again, all right. Well, here's another little article about insurance notes. Okay, through entry into the juristic highways of interstate commerce by participation in an insurance policy program, as insurance is interstate commerce, and the king or the state retains a third-party beneficiary status in all commercial transactions that fall under his regulatory commercial jurisdictional penumbra. All right, what's it saying here? What we've said all along. If you get into an insurance contract with car insurance, life insurance, or whatever, the state has third-party beneficial interest in it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Well, we just showed it. Lloyd's of London, the big pharma, the hospital.
Yeah.
See what I mean? So again, this obviously is talking about limited liability, is talking about a third-party participation, just like what we've shown in so many things. The state or the king or whoever got their nose in everybody's business.
Yep.
Anyway, in 1944, the Supreme Court decided a case called United States versus Southeastern Underwriters Association, which held that insurance all by itself is interstate commerce. And if you manage to participate in policies of insurance, you are participating in interstate commerce. Federal commercial benefits are being accepted, and the reciprocal quid pro quo taxation is necessary. Now, see, this is just another instance of some of the material that we've been over before about the difference between the private and the public and licensing and privileges and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But as for taxation expectations, your acceptance of the benefits of an insurance program is deemed as evidence of entry into interstate commerce, and hence such participants are an object suitable for federal taxation, regardless of any political status and regardless of the presence or absence of any other juristic contract. Now, what I've tried to do, and many others, through education, is to show you how to take control of that situation by taking control of what's called the straw man trust. And so instead of being a victim of the interstate commerce and so forth, then you become an active controller of it. And
Well,
because you're coming from the private side,
yeah.
then you have the ascendancy over any fictional public entity. That's exactly what we're doing here.
Right, and I think this is what happened to Sean David Martin too. He was trying to take control, but I don't know how, and they wanted to use him as an example, but I don't know how he went about doing it.
Well,
And
I knew Sean during those times.
yeah, I'm not
So
sure if he was.
yeah, I'm not going to really comment on a lot of that, but
Sure.
just know the reason I brought him up earlier
Yeah.
was because of the information he put out in the 3-volume set called Sands of Times. You can learn ever so much.
Right, right. No, but he goes on to the Wolf Spirit Radio and talks with JP from prison, and he explains, that they're using him as an example. And you said that yourself, but something happened where this was involved, and they don't like when you do they
Well, the real reason
do
was
it the right
because of those
way.
documents he had. I mean, he
Yeah.
talks about other things.
Oh, okay. Because he
Because
did talk about
Sean,
that. That's all
yeah,
I'm
Sean's very knowledgeable on a lot of things, and sometimes I just have to put my foot down with him and say, "Hey, don't be teaching that."
right. Mm.
Because we were on that cruise together, and he was giving a demonstration. He was teaching stuff to people that had no idea, no background, no foundation for what he's fixing to tell them. I told him right there on the spot. I said, "Stop!
Yeah, stop doing it.
Don't!" I said, don't you dare show that to these people."
Right, because they weren't ready for it.
Oh no,
Yeah,
nowhere close to it.
exactly.
Now, was what he was saying viable? It would be for me. It would be for him,
Right.
or somebody who was knowledgeable as the subject. But what he was trying to show people who had no experience, no background, no foundation, I just told him, stop it.
Yeah.
Don't be bringing those things up to these people. You're only going to hurt them. Not that I was, some kind of glorious, guru about all that stuff, but I knew what would happen if people tried to take that technology you show them and try to apply it. You're going to get kicked in the head for it.
Well, right, because if you don't understand what you're doing, gonna, yeah, you're gonna
Yeah. So
cause
so again,
problems.
we have to
So
be very, very careful
with the technology, yeah, definitely.
about what we do.
Yeah.
It's like what is the physician's creed? Above all else, do no harm.
Right.
And as educators, that's exactly the position that many of us are in.
Right.
We get to a place, where we dare not say anymore publicly.
Yeah.
Don't you think I understand a hell of a lot more than I talk about?
Yeah, you
Oh,
do.
I certainly do.
Yeah.
But can I say it publicly to an audience that's going to hear it and I have no idea what their level of comprehension would be? They'll shoot themselves in the foot.
Right. That's why sometimes people, they're trying to follow some of these practices, but it's like I said, it's a college level course. You can't just take a concept we talk about without having the foundation underneath it first.
Exactly.
You have to do things in the right order. And so sometimes people get themselves in trouble because they jump the gun and they think, they haven't crossed all their T's and dotted all their I's. So
Yeah.
important to do it from A to Z, soup to nuts.
Well, here's another little article. Like I say, this is the stuff you can find on the internet. Once you know the buzzwords, like Tontine, George Rapp, Robert Owen, some of these kind of things, you can find stuff all over the place.
Right.
Anyway, this one right here, I forgot where I downloaded it from. There's a few things I've highlighted here, just as concepts, so people might start to think about some of this. This is, what is a Tontine agreement? The Tontine agreement is a form of pooled investment fund to which the investors contribute a lump sum and in exchange receive ongoing payments or dividends as a return on their investment. Similar to a single premium immediate annuity, the payments from a tontine are typically made for life and end up only at death. However, with a tontine, the payments that cease at the death of one investor are redistributed to the other investor participants, increasing their subsequent payouts until they too pass away. For instance, he gives a little chart down here. Let's say everybody started over here at 25, you see down there, and everybody's still alive. then one guy dies, and so the premium paid out to the remaining 24 is elevated a little bit until you finally get over here, until the last guy standing, he gets it all. See what I mean? So it's exponential depending on the number of participants. And so that's pretty much what this fellow's showing, trying to explain tontines and how they work. That's why it's illegal.
Right, but is that why, I mean, I don't really want to get into the details, but certainly by, I'm not sure when you were kicked out, you had said, but was it because you could have been approaching to, you were getting older, which in risk puts them at risk.
No, it wasn't that way.
Okay, I didn't know.
I just pointed that out, that I had been involved in a situation where contributions made were withheld, even though they expelled me. But let's take this chart right here and let's suppose a case.
Yeah. Well,
let's say 25 guys get together.
Yeah.
They say, we want to do this tontine thing. We're all going to put in, let's say, $10,000.
Right.
So everybody has good faith, good confidence. They're expecting premium pays out, maybe 6% or whatever per annum on their investment and so forth. But unbeknownst to the other 24, one of them is actually a mafia hitman.
Of course. Because they don't want you dying because they don't want to do the payout.
Yeah, so just all of a sudden this mafia guy said, hey, you know what? I can make a whole lot more money if I start bumping off some of these idiots. Well, wouldn't it work that way?
Yeah, you'd make more money.
So you see the inherent danger.
Yeah.
That could be associated with something like this.
But they're still doing it.
Well, of course they're still doing it.
That's what this whole system is that we talked about today. This whole
exactly. That's what I'm trying to. What I'm trying to expose here is so that people would understand, where some of these concepts have come from, how they work, so we don't go and repeat it.
Right, exactly.
That's my whole point. Because when you start talking about limited liability, I put it right down in practical terms. What's the major cause of traffic accidents in the United States? It's car insurance. That's the major factor. Now, how do we correct that? See, I don't have all the solutions to those kind of things, but what I'm saying is, how do you get people to the point where they start to act reasonably, rationally, and take responsibility for their own actions and not trying to lay it off on somebody else? Is limited liability ruining our perception of life and reality? And I'll have to postulate that yes, it is.
Yes, it is. Certainly is. People need to take responsibility for their actions.
Well, yeah, that's what we're trying to encourage.
People don't like it.
So these are things that we as a society, as people and so forth, need to evaluate as we start to move away from a system that has corrupted humanity.
Yeah, definitely.
And move into a situation that's, somewhat better. Like I said, we're going at this whole thing step by step. And I had suggested that, that the interim government is a step into something better. And many of us who are capable of operating at this level here are very much upset with how slowly we're getting there.
Right.
Because it's causing us undue harm.
Absolutely.
We're getting the stuffings beat out of us, as we're trying to get, and so again, some of us, like I say, I came on this planet straight out of the seventh dimension, and so did you. And we come into these physical bodies down here with talents, abilities, and so forth that we're trying to bring to others so it would be helpful to them. But my goodness gracious, man, we're getting the stuffings kicked out of us, and it hurts. And so that's why we ask, for everybody's, kind prayers, consideration, sending us good thoughts and everything, because we have to have it. We can't continue on. they already killed me once.
Mm.
It didn't work. They brought me back. I wasn't altogether happy about that.
Yeah,
But
really.
Luis is constantly getting pounded, and many of those who you look around to see, they're constantly being pounded. And so, we just need everybody's help and good thoughts and everything. Anyway, this here is just another good example of why tontines might be dangerous.
Right.
Because if you got 25 guys and it turns out one of them is a mafia hitman, I can tell you how it's going to work out. You know what I mean? All right. So anyway, let me see if there's some other elements because we're kind of getting to the end of it here. But uh,
Mm.
yeah. So while the concept of tontine is new to most advisors and investors in the modern era, it actually has a long and rich history, as documented in his recent book, King William's Tontine. Retirement researcher Moshe Milevsky finds that the origins of the tontine date all the way back to the late 1600s. But unlike their annuity cousins, which are primarily designed specifically to provide lifetime income to the annuitant, and as a form of longevity insurance, the tontine actually originated as a strategy for government borrowing and financing. Now, this is true. I am involved in a retirement annuity called Carpenter's Pension.
Mm.
And there was a lot of money put into that when I was working by myself and other carpenters.
Mm.
And again, it was a tontine because when, let's say, somebody came into the union and stayed for less than 5 years.
Mm. Right. It was a 5-year. Yeah.
You had to be vested. It took at least 5 years to become vested in the retirement. And if you left and were not vested, guess what happened?
You didn't get anything.
You don't get anything.
Right.
So a lot of guys who are called travelers, they work here for a while, they work there for a while, all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to lobby to get all of their retirement into one central fund
Right.
so they could have that investment and so forth. But I'm involved. I'm involved in a tontine.
Mm.
You know.
So those are retirement
Yeah.
benefits.
And guess where all those funds are invested
In
to
stock.
pay the annuities and so forth.
Well, it's in mutual funds and stock markets. Other people's mutual funds. You got to watch that movie, Other People's Money, with Danny DeVito. It's really a funny movie. It's one of my favorite. Larry
Yeah.
the Liquidator.
Okay. Well, I won't go over any more of it. Like I say, all this stuff is right there uh, on the internet. You can find all these things if you just know a few buzzwords,
Right.
that you can use to start looking some of these things up. Like I say, I've been looking at this for a long time. Been looking at insurance, looking at insurance adjusters. I mean, I learned ever so much from that one fellow. He was an insurance adjuster, and he told me things. He said, "Here's what it takes." He said, "This is what's legal. This is what's lawful." And then you see these other things happening, like Lloyd's of London
Mm-hmm.
insuring me. Now, where the hell they get off doing that?
Right.
Where they get off doing that? See, this is the same thing that Hitler did way back when. I think he's carrying something like a $10 million insurance policy in all his soldiers.
Mm.
And then when he had completely, run the gambit on that, then guess who he started to insure? The people in the concentration camps.
Yeah, the enemy. Or yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Oh yeah.
You mean the labor camps, according to Jim Fetzer?
Yeah. Whoever's in the labor, and there were labor camps. I mean, I don't know what Jim said about the numbers, but I'm telling you, after they had taken out insurance policies and nobody was willing to insure any more of the soldiers and all that kind of stuff, then all of a sudden they started to insure the people in the labor camps.
Yeah. Well, that's a funny thing that you should mention, but we're almost out of time,
Yeah.
we are out of time. So I think thanks, Winston, for presenting that to us, because that does open our eyes to, to how things are being run and how we need to stop it. And it was really very appropriate, I guess, to start it out with the secret space program and to
Yeah,
talk about the new upcoming United States Space Force, because this is the source of the funding. So this is how they're funding
exactly,
it.
exactly. And so again, I mean, when we start talking about disclosure, I'm doing disclosure.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what's happening. Do you want to keep it up that way, or do you want to find some other way to do these things? And I pointed out the threat is real. How do we as earthlings
Hmm.
deal with the threat? And wouldn't it be better for the whole defense program if everyone was informed and participate in it,
Right.
not by theft and deception?
Hmm.
That's my point. So I'll let it go with that.
Okay, well, no, this is really food for thought, very thought provoking. Makes us all kind of take a pause, step back, and kind of,
Yeah,
reevaluate, where we are and where we're going, because it's not working, clearly, not for us. And there's got to be more for us at this point, because humanity's not going to tolerate being farmed as sheep any longer,
yep,
really.
that's right.
The world's, they're awakening, and it's time. But Winston, you're so right. If we don't understand history, we will repeat it. So
Yeah,
this is the problem. These aren't, these are concepts that have already been tried and tested, and they fail, and that's why they're illegal. But somehow, some people can still get to do it in secrecy, and that's what's wrong, and we need to stop that. So thank you for sharing your Winston wisdom with us, Winston, because every week you do, and but we're better off because of you. So thank you so much.
well, just trying to make the world a little bit better place for myself and my family and friends and for
Yeah,
everybody.
true.
Like I say, I don't have to do any of this. I
Hmm.
don't have to. I got other things that I could do,
Yeah, exactly.
but that's not what I came for.
Right.
I came for this, and this is what I do. So if it's helpful to people, I'm very happy about it.
Hmm.
If it's offensive to some, take a close look at it. Take a close look at yourself and what was your reaction to it. Because I'm just guaranteeing you, anybody who's an insurance salesman or annuity salesman is going to take a look at what I said and say that Winston is completely crazy. Oh, really?
You're right.
Go take a look at it. Go back in history. Go back over the things I said and see, is this really something that you want to continue to participate in? Maybe you will, maybe you won't. That's up to you. But I'm giving full disclosure.
There you go, Winston. Well, thank you so much. So, folks, remember that you can follow us on our official pages. You can only access, really, to know that it's official, you can access it on our website or find the links on our website. And that's how you know it's an official Goldfish Report link. So, if you have any questions about whether you're watching the Goldfish Report on our official channel, just go to our page and click on the links on our page, and you will go to our website at www.thegoldfishreport.com, and you will have links to all of our media. So then there's no question about it. So
Yep.
I know that there was confusion. There was a lot of confusion because there are sites that are there's an imposter uh, YouTube channel, and a lot of people thought it was us, and they were subscribing. And of course, this was the plan of YouTube, was to destroy us. So, but our links are always on our website. So thank you so much for viewing. To our viewers, have a great weekend. Winston, have a great weekend, and let's all hold the energy and pray for better changes. To come and for these things to manifest quickly.
Well, I hope everybody is praying as hard for me as I've been praying for them.
Yeah, I hope so.
I never pass an opportunity, to pray for mankind and for people who are trying to work in these projects, because I need your prayers.
Mhm.
And I think that probably my prayers on your behalf are having a good effect. And so that's why I keep doing it.
Well, thank you, Winston. So, our prayers and thoughts to everybody as well. And we will be back on Monday with another episode of our POTUS reports, which you can only, if you want to watch on YouTube, you can only access from our website. But if you want to watch it on BitChute, they're all there. But I don't know. We'll just see. We'll hopefully there won't be much more shadow banning, but they're all there. So Winston, have a great weekend, and to our viewers, this concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report. Thanks for joining us.